morning. Today is Tuesday, September 13th, 2016. It is 10 a.m. It is my pleasure to call to order the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers. Ms. Lisa Mosby, would you please call the roll?
Dennis Bridges.
Here.
Mark Carthon.
Here.
Robert Davis.
Here.
Jeff Duffer.
Here.
Robert Helms.
Here.
David Neal.
Here.
Charles Rahm.
Here.
Mr. President, all board members are here and accounted for.
Thank you, Ms. Mosby. Moving on to the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Rahm, a second by Mr. Helms. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to the minutes. Ask for the approval of the June 14, 2016 minutes.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Helms, a second by Mr. Rahm. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now to the August 9th, 2016 minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Rahm, a second by Mr. Duffer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now to the legal report, Ms. Allison Ratton.
Good morning. First case on the legal report is against an establishment. It's complaint number 2016-029-131. This complaint was filed by a decedent's mother who stated she had not received the cremains of her son. She alleges that for 1 month after the funeral service, she had not received the cremains and thought the establishment was holding them hostage. In its response, the establishment owner stated that when funeral arrangements were made, the complainant, who is the deceased biological mother, the person that raised decedent, the caregiver, and decedent's daughter were present and working together to make arrangements, and decedent's daughter, as his next of kin, signed the cremation authorization. After the funeral, the cremains were given to decedent's caregiver, who had communicated with complainant regarding the burial. The establishment owner stated that decedent's daughter was in agreement that the caregiver should possess the cremains for burial. Under Tennessee Code Section 62-5-703, the rights to control the disposition of remains as a child before the surviving parent. Legal spoke with the caregiver, who stated that after the funeral service, she had decedent's daughter's approval to take the cremains home and held them until the cemetery plot was ready for burial. Decedent's caregiver also stated complainant was present when the cremains were buried, so no issue remains as to the whereabout of said cremains. Therefore, legal recommends to close this case.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Helms, a second by Mr. Cochran. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
The next complaint, number 2016-03-7771, is against an establishment. Upon routine inspection, it was discovered this establishment failed to disclose to purchasers that the amount it charged for cremation was higher than the price the establishment paid to the crematory on the funeral goods and services selected for 3 decedents. Further, the establishment had failed to retain completed cremation authorizations for 2 decedents. When questioned about the missing authorizations during the inspection, the establishment manager called the cremation company, and it was able to obtain a copy of the missing authorizations shortly thereafter. In his response, the establishment manager stated he was unclear of the breakdown with the cremation portion of cash advances, but was in no way attempting to deceive customers. He also stated the cremation authorizations were misplaced. He accepts responsibility and will see that the issues are corrected. Legal recommends a civil penalty for $500 and authorization for a hearing.
Motion to approve the recommendation.
Second.
Motion Mr. Rahm, a second Mr. Helms. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Next complaint, number 2016048271, is against an establishment. Here, the complaint was filed by the board upon receiving the investigation report from a county air pollution control bureau who responded to a report of black smoke coming from the crematory stack operated by the establishment. According to the complaint received by the investigator, the emissions were at approximately 80% I don't know how to say that word. And the investigator personally observed emissions with 10% opacity. The investigator went to the crematory building where an active cremation was occurring, but was unable to make contact with anyone at the crematory or funeral home. The investigator reached an establishment employee through an answering service. The investigator advised this establishment employee of the complaint, and the employee, by his own admission, remarked that no one was present during the cremation, as it was the normal practice not to remain on site after cremation commences. In its response, the establishment stated that the violations pertaining to the complaint brought by the County Air Pollution Control Bureau had been remedied, and alleged the conduct did not violate state regulations pertaining to crematory operation. Legal recommends a civil penalty of $500 and authorization for a hearing.
Approve the recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Rom, second by Mr. Bridges. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Complaint 2016-051141 against an establishment, 2016-051142 against a funeral director, 2016-051143 against an embalmer is next. This complaint was filed by a medical examiner that autopsied human remains, then created and signed an original death certificate that was released with the body to the establishment. A few weeks later, he received a copy of the filed death certificate, which is not consistent with the original death certificate, as the filed death certificate had a different typeface, omits information that was on the original, and the complainant adamantly states the signature on the filed death certificate is not his signature, so his signature must have been forged by funeral director. The complainant submitted the death certificate he purported to have filled out, and this death certificate that he purports was filed with his complaint, which do contain differing typefaces. In the response, the funeral director, embalmer, responding for himself and the establishment, stated his secretary thought all death certificates had to be typed or computer generated. He admitted to the mistake of not instructing his staff, and that he signed the certificate by mistake without recognizing it was from the medical examiner's office. Here we recommend for the establishment a civil penalty of $1,000, an authorization for a hearing, and a letter of warning for the funeral director, embalmer.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Helms, second by Mr. Duffer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Complaint 2016-041171 against a funeral director. Complaint 2016-041172 against an embalmer. Here the complaint was filed by a funeral director alleging this funeral director embalmer filed a complaint with the board using false and misleading context. The complainant states that the information provided by respondent to the board is false and could be potentially damaging to complainant. Complainant also alleges that respondent has taken photos of deceased individuals that respondent embalmed. In his response, respondent states he personally witnessed the conduct that led him to file a complaint with the board and provided further details about the incident that prompted him to file a complaint. Respondent stated he showed complainant pictures of the visitation respondent arranged for respondent's father and showed complainant a picture of a body that had been exhumed after many years, which he attests was used between licensed directors in a professional manner as a learning experience. Legal recommends to close this case.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Cochran, second by Mr. Rom. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, the last complaint today is number 2016047311 against a funeral director. The complaint was filed by a consumer alleging the funeral director placed an obituary for a public figure on all the funeral homes owned by his company, though he was never given permission, which, in complainant's opinion, falsely gave the impression funeral directors' homes assisted decedent's family when they had not. Complainant also stated that when she requested that the obituary be removed from the websites, it was not removed immediately and took nearly all day to be taken down. In his response, the funeral director stated his posting shared a tribute from information posted by other media and was posted as a tribute, not to benefit his company. Further, the funeral director stated he was not privy to the family's desire that the obituary not be published, and once he personally received word of the family's wishes, he had it pulled from the websites. With his response, the funeral director also provided the obituary that was posted by his funeral homes, and in no way did the post mention that his funeral home assisted the family. Legal recommends closing this case.
Motion by Mr. Bridges, second by Mr. Davis. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ratton. Now to the director's report. Mr. Robert Gribble.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first item is the performance and compliance audit. The Tennessee Comptroller of the Treasury Division of State Audit is in the process of conducting a performance and compliance audit for the Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers and other regulatory boards within the Department of Commerce and Insurance. I met with 3 auditors with the Comptroller of the Treasury on Monday, August the 22nd, for an entrance conference, an initial interview regarding the funeral board. The Performance and Compliance section of the Comptroller's Office conducts performance audits based on identification of risk and statewide processes and programs or agency-specific operations and activities. This section also conducts performance audits to evaluate the efficiency and effectiveness of government programs in accordance with the Government Entity Review Law. In coordination with the Financial and Compliance Audit section, this section is responsible for auditing functional areas of departments, agencies, and institutions of state government, as well as federally sponsored programs in accordance with the Single Audit Act. And we'll update the board as the audit progresses. That's the when I met with them, they asked for 6 or 8 documents. Ms. Mosby and I supplied those documents to them later that afternoon, all with the exception of one, and we supplied that one to them the next day. And I know there'll be several more requests coming, but as of now, the communication that we've gotten from them is that they acknowledge receipt of the documents we supplied to them, and I'm sure they'll follow up with us. This is typical for our sunset date for the board is coming up. I didn't 30th of next year, and it's typical that we go through an audit right before that, and then the legislature determines how many. Have a question about it, I'll be glad to answer them. I'm sorry. The next item is the legislative update for today's meeting. There was no proposed legislation submitted to administration regarding the Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers for consideration of inclusion in the governor's legislative packet for the next legislative session. Licensee report is a report of licenses that have been administratively approved by the executive director pursuant to the board authority for the period of August 9, 2016 through September 12, 2016. And you have a list of those establishments and individuals that we have approved. Closed establishment report for this meeting. There are 2 establishments that have reported closing since the last board meeting. Number 1 is H.H. Hudson Funeral Home, 525 West Market Street in Dyersburg, Tennessee. And number 2 is Jackson County Funeral Home Cremation Services at 402A East Gore Avenue in Gainesboro. Disciplinary action report is a report of consent orders administratively accepted and approved by the executive director pursuant to the board authority for the period of August 1 through August 31, 2016. And there are 3 that are listed there for you to look at. Complaint report for today's meeting. We have a total of 24 complaints. 8 of those are open against funeral directors and/or embalmers, and 16 against establishments. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have, but if you have no questions, that concludes my report.
Ask for an approval for Mr. Dribble's report.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion, Mr. Helms, second, Mr. Duffer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now to adopt the board meeting dates for 2017.
Mr. President, there is a list of proposed board meeting dates for 2017. This board normally meets the second Tuesday of each month, and there are no holidays on the second Tuesday of any month of next year. So you have listed before you what is the second Tuesday of each month for January through December for your consideration.
Shortly, those days have worked well.
Ms. Mosby just informed me that those aren't on your iPads. I'm sorry. It's January. I can go through them, but it's the second Tuesday is what it is. Second Tuesday of each month, January through December.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Rom, second by Mr. Duffer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries for the meetings for next year. Approval of license application, board members for individuals.
President, there are no individuals to appear before you today.
Establishments.
One establishment. Gentlemen, we'll just take a seat over there to the right. This is Tribute Funeral and Cremation Services. Mr. Paul Christian Daly is the proposed manager. It's to be located at 419 West Elk Avenue, Suite 4 in Elizabethton, Tennessee. It's a new establishment. The ownership is a limited liability company, and the owner is Tribute Funeral Alternative and Cremation Center, LLC, 355 Cameron Court in Jonesboro, Tennessee. Gentlemen, if you will, please introduce yourselves to the board and make whatever kind of statement you'd like to make to the board members.
Morning, Board. My name is Paul Daly, license number 5025 and 5026, funeral director and embalmer. I will be the manager of the location that we're proposing to open there.
Morning, Board. My name is Dustin Lance Duggar, and I will be the co-owner of the establishment that we're proposing to open.
Mr. Daly, you will be the only licensed individual, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Mr. Duggar, what besides co-owner, what will be your responsibilities? What will your
My responsibilities will be the financial side of things, as far as the accounting side of the funeral side of things. And I'm currently I've finished with I've got one class, the comprehensive review, with John A. Gupton here in Nashville. So I'll be taking that course and finishing up my licensure.
Daly, I assume by your price list, you're going into a very competitive area price-wise?
That is correct, yes.
I'm assuming your selections will be done computer selection screen, or?
Yes, sir. We'll do computer selection. We'll also do just picture format books as well, yes.
I apologize for asking so many questions. I'm not real familiar with your area. How far is the preparation facility that's going to be doing your preparation work and your facility?
It would be about 35-minute drive to our preparation facility.
I noticed that there's only one individual that's listed who will be doing all your preparation work. Is that correct? Or is it just their firm? Or
Their firm, we also have Tri-City Mortuary Service in our local area that is available for all funeral homes in that area that we can use as well.
one other question, I promise I'll
I don't mind.
As far as your vehicles and so forth, from the pictures that I've seen here, certainly your facility doesn't have any type of parking porch or portage per se, because you've got a fast cash thing connected to you. What your cars, will you be using other firms' cars, or will you have cars, or what?
We actually do have another facility as well, and Gray, Tennessee, and we do own our own hearse and van as well, yes.
How far is that from this location?
It's about a 20-minute drive,
Okay.
yes.
Have a preparation room facility at that location?
We use the same
Okay.
preparation facility for that location that we do for this one as well.
Bailey, is that crematory close to your facility?
It actually is. The crematory from our facility is probably a 10-minute drive. It is actually pretty well centered in between our two locations.
Bailey, how long have you been a licensed funeral director in Balmer?
I obtained my license in, I believe it was March of '97.
It appears his application is all in order. You have no,
Yes, sir, it's complete for your consideration.
On this, Mr. Gribble, on the crematory report, I noticed that the examination occurred last year, 8/31/15. Do we have a current one?
It may have been inspected during the month of August. This, the new establishment inspection was done on August the 3rd, so the proposed establishment inspection was done on August the 3rd, so at that time, the August 31, 2015 was the latest inspection report for the crematory. There may have been an inspection by the field rep since that time. We can find out for you if you want us to. Their license is current. I'm aware of that.
I just noticed they had a warning issued, so we'll make sure we're in good standing with that crematory.
License for the crematory expires December 31, 2017.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion, Mr. Helms, second, Mr. Rom. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Lord, appreciate it, guys.
Gentlemen, we'll send you an email with your license number and the license, black and white copy of the license attached to it. It may, depend on what time we get finished today, it could be tomorrow.
New business.
None that I'm aware of, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Back to the formal hearing.
Thank you, Chairman Neal. Let's see, Mr. Grimmett, do you want to try your client one more time, or?
Judge, I've tried him numerous times. It simply rings and then goes to static. My office has also been trying to call him since this morning. We have not reached him. I'm going to be asking the board for a continuance until
All right.
next month, so we can try it at that time and he can be present.
All right. Let me make just a formal announcement on the record here to start our hearing officially. I know the court reporter has gotten that already, or some of it. All right, today is September the 13th, 2016. My name is Steve Darnell. I'm an administrative law judge assigned by the Tennessee Department of State Administrative Procedures Division, and I've been designated to sit with the Tennessee Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers this morning for the hearing of the case styled V.E. Parham and Son Funeral Home and Virgil Parham III. That's APD docket number 12.21-136334A. And our board is met this morning. This case was scheduled for hearing at 10 o'clock. It's actually 10:30 at this point. Board has taken up some other business in the interim. Let me ask the board members, though, to state their presence. As we'll start with you, Mr. Duffer. Just introduce yourself on the record, sir.
I'm Jeff Duffer.
All right.
Dennis Bridges.
Charles Rom.
Mark Cochran.
David Neal.
Robert Helms.
Robert Davis.
All right. And Mr. Neal, this is a quorum of the board, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Is this the full board?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I assumed it was, but didn't know for sure. All right. Attorney Dennis Gregory is present, represents the state. Mr. Gregory, are you ready to proceed this morning?
We are.
All right. Attorney David Grimmett represents the respondent, Mr. Parham, who also represents his funeral home. Mr. Grimmett, I know from our previous discussions that Mr. Parham is not here this morning, and that you intend to make a motion to continue. Is that correct?
That's correct, Judge.
All right. Members of the board, the Administrative Procedures Act and the model rules of the Administrative Procedures Division permit either the administrative law judge alone to make the decision to continue the matter, or the board can make that decision. My policy has always been that if the board's here and ready to go forward, that that it's the board's choice to make that decision. The rules basically is whether or not good cause is set forth to continue the matter or not. If you decide not to continue the matter, service is appropriate. Mr. Grimmett's here because they were given notice, and the board can elect to proceed uncontested, meaning it can hear the state's proof and take what action it intends to based on that. So before we get to that, I'm going to ask Mr. Grimmett to make a statement, address the board, and tell them why you want a continuance, and then we'll see what Mr. Gregory's position is.
Thank you, gentlemen of the board. My name is David Grimmett. I'm an attorney here in Nashville. I've been retained by Mr. Parham and the Parham Funeral Home. This case has been going on for a few months. We continued originally when I was retained, and I asked for a continuance at that time and was granted. I do not know why Mr. Parham is not here. I actually met with him last week, and my office spoke with him several times yesterday. He is traveling from Springfield, so I don't know what's going on there, but it is currently 10:30. I would ask for continuance until next month. I believe the next date that y'all have is October the 11th, 2016, which is the second Tuesday in October. Usually in these cases, we have one of two options, either to go forward uncontested, well, one of three options, either to go forward uncontested, or the state will put on its proof, and you will have that option. The second option is for you to continue it until the next hearing, and the third option is for you to continue it and then basically place in a summary suspension, which means that Mr. Parham and Parham Funeral Home is not allowed to do any kind of funerals between now and October. Now, I will tell you, this is a small funeral home. I'm not going to go into the details, but just kind of give you an idea, last year alone, I think they only did 5 cases. So we're not talking about a big impact, but it would be a big impact on my client if the board decides to revoke his license. So I'm going to be asking for a continuance.
Gregory, you want to address the board?
Members, Dennis Gregory for the agency. I understand Mr. Grimmett's position, however, so the board is aware and the record is clear. The state filed this originally on March the 9th, 2016. Today, of course, is September 13th, 2016. There was really an agreement by both parties back in May or June to continue the case until today. So state's also in a position where it does have its inspector here as a witness. Of course, Mr. Gribble would also testify as a witness. So the board would, I asked the board to deny the motion and allow us to proceed uncontested.
Mr. Gregory, who do you have other than Mr. Gribble to testify today?
Mr. Kesey, he's a state inspector for the funeral board.
Okay, so want the board to understand we don't have any witnesses that have been brought in or from other places. So not that Mr. Gribble and Mr. Kesey are not important folks, but that's our the argument of counsel. Let me point out this was continued once before, but according to my file, that was before, not in this manner. It was continued by the ALJ before it was set or before it appeared before the board. So let Ms. Neal, I'll turn the matter over to the board for deliberation, whether to continue the matter or not. If the alternatively, if the board decides not to continue it, then you'll have to decide whether or not you want to proceed uncontested. So.
I mean, personally, before I make a decision on whether or not to revoke someone's license, I'd like to hear both sides. I understand, you know, he had notice and probably should be here today, but again, like I said, before I make a decision on revocation, I would like to at least give an opportunity for that other side. So I would not have a problem continuing.
What's been the working relationship between the respondent and the board in the office? I mean, has it been cooperative?
Mr. Gregory and I have worked well together as far as this case goes. We've done a little bit of discovery. As far as communication between my client and the board, as soon as I became involved, I made sure that he did not have any further communication with the state. Because that's what I always do.
There has been communication before Mr. Grimmett was involved.
It's going to be part of the proof, I think.
Right, so I don't want to get too much into that, just because
That is all the more reason that I would ask for a continuance. One of the reasons I think the state is going forward with revocation is due to some possible mental health issues with Mr. Parham, and I think it should be up to y'all to decide whether he has those mental health issues, and it's probably best to actually see him face-to-face and to ask him questions pursuant to the Administrative Procedures Act.
response to that, there are other issues that involve substantive rules and statutes that are, it's not just a mental health case. I want to be clear about that. And that's why Mr.
I don't know if y'all have seen the notice of hearing yet in this case, because sometimes the board members review it first and then sometimes they don't, so.
Anything scheduled next month, hearing-wise? Any other cases?
Doesn't show up next month. I'll drag him here if I have to, but we'll see what I can do.
Asked twice.
No, I don't think I could either.
No.
I'll ask one more thing. I don't know whether or not you may want to have to step in on this or not, but he's got notice of being here. This is the body that would also conduct, hear and potentially impose a summary suspension. Has notice of this hearing, doesn't have notice of a summary suspension. I think that's where that I'd ask probably the ALJ to rule in on this, whether or not notice is adequate, but at a bare minimum, we'd ask that you at least hear some proof to make a decision on a.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
As far as summary suspension goes, that's usually whenever there's an emergency that proposes an emergency harm to the public. And in this case has been going since March. They've never asked for a summary suspension. Therefore, I would certainly object to a summary suspension, but I would defer to either the ALJ or to the board.
Members of the board, I would be hesitant to say Mr. Parham has sufficient notice to be here for a summary suspension today. So that is an issue that might best be avoided at this point.
There's a due process.
Move it to next month.
Next month.
I'll make a motion, we continue this to next month.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Helms, a second, Mr. Cochran, to move this to next month. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Chairman Neal, I will draw the order if that's okay, and just reflect that the board voted unanimously to continue it to the next docket. Ms. Gribble, what date will that be?
I've got October 11th as the second Tuesday next month.
7th? Is that correct? And will that also be at 10 again? All right.
Unless the board wants to meet earlier than that, I mean.
And start, that's at the board's pleasure.
Noticed at 10, and the board normally meets at 10, but
You want to meet earlier than 10?
At 10. All right, members of the board, my order will note that the matter will not be continued again absent a showing of extraordinary circumstances. So I'll prepare that and enter it today, and that'll give Mr. Parham sufficient time to get it to him and get him here. All right.
Thank you, board members.
All right, thank you.
Darnell.
Board, considering there's no further business, may I be dismissed? Thank you.
No new business. We ask for an adjournment.
So moved.
Second.